Hello friends, it's me, and today, James Charles, Style Theory. Let's check out Style Theory. Why is James Charles selling painted from the Style Theories? Together, let's go.
Now, this product right here, these little babies are paint tubes of Create Paint, and these are multi-use paints that you can use on your face.
Excuse me, but why is James Charles selling me paint? And second question, why is he expecting me to put it on my face?
They are paints, so in theory, they should work.
Oh, well, he did it. He said the magic word. Now,
Said the magic word, theory.
oh, by the laws of the internet, I am legally obligated
Totally legit theorist, legal on that.
to a theory about this very topic. It's kind of like when you say Beetlejuice 3 times, except much nerdier. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Style Theory, the
Hello Internet, welcome to Style Theory.
channel that was rocking the blueberry milk trend before it was cool. Speaking of colors, let's talk about paint, or more accurately, Painted. The brand brought to you by the controversial sister at the party, James Charles.
Hi, sisters.
Wait, hold on. I can never keep track of this stuff. Am I allowed to speak about him? Hasn't he been canceled at least like, what, 3 times? Oh, his apology videos seemed sincere and did not wind up monetized on Spotify. Sure, then by all means fine. If that's the bar that the internet has set for itself, we'll go with it. Let's continue. If you haven't heard of him before, James Charles was at one point the top makeup and beauty influencer here on YouTube.com. And despite a variety of controversies, continues to be a mega force in the industry across platforms, dominating with a combined follower base of over 80 million strong. And recently, James has found himself once again in the headlines, not for doing anything shady, thankfully, but rather by launching his first series of makeup products, Create Paint. Stuff that looks a lot more like supplies I'd pick up from my local Michaels or Hobby Lobby, rather than something I'm actively getting at Sephora to put on my face. And
But let me say that please do recognize that this video came out last year, which is 2023. Right now it's 2024. Yeah, I'm sorry for being late.
Certainly been some controversy around the ingredients inside the tubes. There have been many well-informed videos about that already. Instead, I want to know more about what's going on the outside. Believe it or not, James isn't alone in turning his audience into walking, talking Bob Ross paintings. I was so intrigued by this unique makeup offering that I decided to look a bit deeper, and that's when I noticed a pattern. Looks like James and Painted aren't the first makeup brands to dip their brushes into this specific bucket. In fact, what we're seeing with Painted and other products like it is the culmination of so many important fashion and cultural milestones going back, no joke, hundreds of years. So if you want to get a glimpse of where makeup has come from and the hard-fought cultural battles that got us to where we are today in fashion, this one product is like a teeny tiny little overpriced time capsule. Now, despite the Painted brand and the acrylic tube packaging, these things are not actual paints, nor are they eyeshadows, as many people seem to be assuming online. In reality, they're cream to powder pigments. And to understand what exactly that means, we could just break it down into its 2 separate parts. Cream to powder and pigment. So let's just start with the first part, cream to powder. What's that? Well, pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a cream product that turns into a powder as you apply it. You see, the liquid in these creams tends not to be water. More often than not, it's alcohol or even some sort of a silicone. These liquids tend to have themselves very low boiling points, which means that any contact with your warm skin is going to cause the liquid part of that thing to evaporate, leaving behind only the dry ingredients. And just like that, boom, you suddenly have highly saturated colored powder on your face. Honestly, it's an incredible feat of science in practical action. But while James's products might look all shiny and new and sci-fi, believe it or not, this type of makeup's been around for nearly 100 years, and their origins date back millennia. You see, using powdered pigments to recolor your face is the origin of makeup, dating all the way back to between 2000 and 1200 BC. It was here when ancient Egyptians like Queen Cleopatra applied powder as a foundation before applying any makeup like eyeliner. And Egypt wasn't alone in this trend either. In ancient China, rice powder was used to whiten and smooth out the complexion. In Japan, same thing, rice powder getting used by geishas to keep their faces extremely pale. In ancient Greece, white skin was a sign of high status because wealthy women didn't have to work in the sun, and so they'd use chalk and white lead to lighten their skin. Yep, you heard that one right, lead. And to think we consider today's beauty standards toxic. Badoom-ching! It's actually kind of a sad badoom-ching though, because lead is poisonous for humans. Anyway, throwing dry powder onto your face and hoping it'll stick, it's gonna present some challenges. It could sometimes be hard to get the highly pigmented powder to stick evenly to your face, leading generations of makeup users to find their own hacks for doing it. Yeah, hacks in a pre-YouTube era. It's hard to believe, but it's true. People used to talk to each other and experiment and tell each other about the things that they were working with. In this case, the hack in question was using something called a vanishing cream prior to applying any sort of powder. It's a bit of an outdated term now, but vanishing creams were basically moisturizers. They were advertised to protect against chapping in cold weather. The name vanishing cream was used because it was lightweight, oil-free, and got absorbed quickly by the skin, causing it to disappear fast. Basically, by applying the moist cream to your face first, it would create a smooth, slightly wet surface that would help the dry powder stick more effectively. And in 1931, the French company Dior Velouté Powder Cream had the bright idea to mix the two together, creating the world's first powder cream hybrid. But that trend wasn't really meant to last. While those products never truly disappeared from store shelves, they were largely overshadowed by the massive reinvention of makeup that was happening at the time over in Hollywood, spearheaded by a man named Max Factor, a guy who began selling eyebrow pencils, eyeshadows, and specialty grease paints to the world. As such, cream powders largely got passed over until much more recently when those sorts of formulations have come back strong. So really, James's latest line is following in the footsteps of some ancient foundations of, well, foundations. But there is another half to this story: pigments. As you can tell, most of the history of makeup has been used to paint the face white or remove blemishes in a very naturalistic way. Why though? Why this emphasis on naturalistic coloring rather than painting ourselves something crazy and out there like blue to look like the Na'vi from Avatar?
I'm afraid I just blew myself.
There's gotta be a better way to say that.
Well, the truth is, it hasn't always been that way. Deeply saturated pigments have also been around since some of the earliest days of makeup. Greek women would use crushed mulberries as rouge and charcoal to define their eyes. Egyptians, again, were the pioneers of a lot of this, making pigments from various minerals like azurite, malachite, and cinnabar with designs that emphasize the eye. Looking back over Japanese history, we know that in ancient times there was a custom of painting the face with bright red pigment. The same was true over in China, where red and yellow powders were used to cover the cheeks and the forehead, simulating the grace and look of a plum blossom. And in Latin American countries like Colombia, cosmetic products used oil or petroleum with colors for the face and vermilion for the bodies, with more color indicating a woman with higher class. The list honestly goes on and on.
As a man, to be honest with you, my understanding of makeup is more towards practical purposes, like against the sun, the enemy, to camouflage, to sabotage, to hide, as a stealth, as a shinobi, as a ninja, as someone that as an assassin. So yeah, like for example, against the sun, like hot sun, how do you fight against that? You apply the thing on the underneath your eye, underneath your eye to help protect your skin, your sight from, I don't know, the sun. I don't know. Yeah, it works. It just works.
But long story short, highly pigmented facial makeup has always been around and has historically been desired, or at least desired up to a point. You see, in many cultures, there eventually comes a point where there's a pushback towards an emphasis on natural beauty. Looking across history, more often than not, this seems to be the result of heavy makeup getting associated with quote-unquote loose women, sex workers. Why? Well, as sex workers aged, but their income depended on their appearance, they opted for more copious amounts of makeup. That is not me shaming anyone, that is just historically how it's played out. Courtesan.
Not sure if you know, there's some sexually transmitted diseases that damage the skin, and in this line of work where the skin is very important in order to earn the money, more makeup can help hide the flaws and age of your skin in order to make you earn more money.
Also often received cosmetics and perfumes as gifts or partial payment, which only pushed that trend further. In the Roman Empire, in Greece, in the Renaissance, you saw this story repeat over and over again. In fact, it was something that became formal policy when Queen Victoria stepped into power over in England. She abhorred makeup, and so in the 18th and 19th century, she made it taboo for everyone, with only sex workers allowed to wear the stuff. Also, actresses. Anyway, it's been moments like this across history that largely set the popular expectation for the role of makeup in society to function more as a naturalistic color palette, dealing a death knell for a lot of the more extreme, highly pigmented color options that exist out there. And honestly, it was that way up until probably about the 1980s, when bright,
1980s is like 40 years ago.
bold, and very heavy makeup looks finally came back into fashion. After
Nearly half a century ago. Wow.
years of war and protest in the US throughout the 60s and 70s, the 80s were this era of hope, optimism, and spending a whole lot more capital. It was also a decade that was confident, bold, and unapologetic. And that enthusiasm reflected in the colors of makeup. Bright neon pinks and greens and blues caught on when worn by music celebrities like Madonna. During this time, you saw the companies start to expand their product lines and test new formulas of tried and true products like foundations and eyeshadows, including the star of our show today, Cream to Powder, which had itself more vibrant color payoff than its purely powder counterparts. Eventually, the extreme pigments would go away again at the end of the decade as grunge and glosses entered the scene in the 1990s. Suddenly, the bright colors of the 80s were out, replaced with smoky eyes and black lipsticks. People were moody, and they wanted you to know about it. On the flip side, you had natural beauty being back in the form of simple glosses and rosy blushes. And from that point forward, trends would largely be dictated by celebrities like the Kardashians, where tans, heavy contouring, and oversized lips were par for the course. The use of extreme colors wouldn't return until, hey, would you look at that, today-ish, where people are looking for the sorts of color payoffs that only Cream to Powder products can provide. But something's still missing about all this. I don't think this is our complete answer. Like, why here? Why now? And why paint specifically? Well, I have an idea, which I'm gonna tell you after I tell you about something that never goes out of fashion, smelling delicious. And you can do just that thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Scentbird. Scentbird is changing the way that you think about your personal fragrance. Now you don't have to head into a big busy store and deal with the overwhelming smells inside. Instead, Scentbird brings the scents directly to you on your doorstep for only $17 a month. No driving or smell-induced headaches required. I love trying out the different smells every month, and honestly, this month might be my favorite ever. It's like they looked into my mind and picked them out just for me. First, I tried Handsome Devil by Grooming Lounge. It's a scent that I can actually see both myself and Steph wanting to rock on a given date night. And luckily, the generous sizes of Scentbird's fragrances mean that there's enough to go around, since each scent comes with a 30-day supply. Next, I spritzed myself with a little Indigo Smoke by Arquiste, which was a very woodsy fragrance that gave me the urge to move to a cabin deep out in the woods. A perfect smell for transitioning into spooky season. And finally, probably my favorite of the bunch was Lamar by House of Beau, a summer seaside scent that takes me back to running around Mexico on vacation earlier this year with Steph and Ollie. The mix of seawater, coconut, and Gardenia Mexicana means that I can actually relive my summer no matter what season I'm wearing it in. And you know that I had to hook you up with an amazing deal. So just for our style theorists today, Scentbird is giving you 55% off your first month. All you gotta do is scan the QR code that you see on screen or click the link in the description below and use the code StyleTheory55 at checkout. That is StyleTheory55 at checkout to get your first month for only $7. You do not want to miss out on that amazing deal, so thank you again to Scentbird for sponsoring this episode. Now let's dive back into the mystery of why people are buying paint for their face. You see, while celebrity culture dominated half the fashion trends in the early 2010s, the other half was dominated by social media. It was the rise of Instagram and YouTube, where makeup was at the forefront. Creators sharing their get ready with me videos, outfits of the day, smoky eye tutorials, they were all at the top of the algorithms, filled with makeup recommendations that their audiences would then go out and buy. This brought about another boom in the makeup industry, with more and more brands becoming household names in ways that they'd never been before, right alongside the creators that were using them. But as that makeup and creator marketplace got mega crowded, suddenly it needed ways to stand out. And so how do you do that? Well, with extreme colors and radical looks. This is where we see the makeup scene on YouTube evolve, away from the everyday, very neutral looks that gained popularity in the era of Zoella, Michelle Phan, Miss Glamorazzi, and Tanya Burr, everyday people just doing their everyday makeups, to something more bombastic, something more artistic. In the late 2010s, we saw the rise of creators branding themselves as makeup artists, MUAs. These creators weren't just doing the same basic smoky eye and red lip, they were taking big swings and seeing big successes. This was the era of Candy Johnson, Made You Look, and Glam and Gore, artists who used makeup to transform themselves into insane and memorable looks. And you saw the makeup industry catching the wave too, with brands like NYX creating the Face Awards to celebrate and uplift these sorts of creators. Makeup wasn't just makeup anymore, it was art. Except not everyone was quite ready to rock a face full of mermaid core. So people needed to find a middle ground, a place that fell somewhere between the insane FX and the boring basics. And that, my dear theorists, is where drag comes in. Yep, you heard me right, drag. Now, if you've been watching my channels for a while, you probably know I'm a huge fan of the drag scene. As a theater kid, I performed in drag across multiple productions, much to the shock of my grandparents in high school. But really, my true introduction into drag as a professional art form was, like so many, through the lens of RuPaul's Drag Race. In fact, I was this close to being a part of that makeover episode with all the online influencers they did back in season 10. This close! I just couldn't do it because I had a scheduling conflict on one of the days. You win this time, Anthony Padilla.
I'm sorry, my dear, but you're up for elimination.
Okay.
Well, maybe not win. No tea, no shade there, buddy. But the story of drag and its connections with the evolution of makeup are undeniably linked. Now, obviously, even me being just a fan and researcher of this space, this isn't my story to tell. And disclaimer, I'm gonna be glossing over a lot of important details and history and hard-fought battles that don't really fit into the story of today's episode. But I heavily encourage you to watch documentaries like Wig or Paris is Burning to educate yourself about the history of this very important art form. Both are available on Max right now for streaming, just FYI. But in general, back in the olden days of theater, we're talking Greece and Roman time, women weren't allowed to perform, which meant that men had to costume themselves as female characters. This tradition would continue much longer than you'd expect, crossing into the Elizabethan era with Shakespearean performances, even working its way to the vaudeville stages of the 1920s and 30s. And of course, when you have such a long history, these artists are gonna find more ways of creating and evolving their performances and their characters. As men worked to better sell the illusion of them being female, they needed ways to soften their harsh lines, reshape their faces, and they did it using makeup. Now right there, my friends, that is one of the first instances of using contouring, using makeup to carve off your natural features by creating artificial shadows and highlights. In the 1920s and 30s, contouring would cross into the film world when actresses like Marlene Dietrich contoured her face for her films. Soon, it was
1920s, 1930s, that's like 100 years ago. Nearly 100 years ago. A century ago.
everywhere and is now in nearly every makeup tutorial since the dawn of YouTube. And it all started with the art of drag. Now, how's that all come back around to James Charles and his makeup brand? Well, as makeup evolved, so did the artistry of drag. Sure, you had what are known today as the fishy queens, looking to replicate as accurately as possible softer, more feminine features, but on the other end of the spectrum, you had queens like Divine, with highly exaggerated features, high pointed eyebrows, bright blue eyeshadow, overdrawn lips, and extreme false lashes. And even Divine was on the less extreme end of what you could see coming out of the club kids scene in New York from the late 80s and early 90s, where the fashion tended to be androgynous and avant-garde in the coolest ways possible. In short, under this one umbrella term of drag, you had a whole range of people experimenting with what fashion and makeup could do, challenging the conventional norms and pushing the application forward. But drag was unfortunately considered to be controversial until, well, it's still controversial to this very day. With hatred and prejudices against LGBT plus communities and a general fear over anything that challenges tradition and convention, drag was forced to become an underground movement, shuttled away from the mainstream Broadway stages where it was being performed, and
I'm gonna give you my opinion about this. Personally speaking, I treat them all as human beings. I see them regardless of what they do, they are all human beings. I tend to see the bright side of things, and me being a human being, that's a bias, I see you as a human being as well. Unless you're an AI, so... But either ways, personally speaking, I'm more towards a traditional individual. I'm a male, I will seek a female, and we will have offsprings, and my children's will be boys and girls. My children, my sons will seek females, my daughters will seek males. Simple as that. Okay? If you go against my ideology, if you go against this traditional ideology, I'm like, I will still respect you, because ultimately speaking, you're also human. That's my bottom line. You are human, I'm human. And I show respect to fellow humans.
Instead to nightclubs. And that's likely where drag would have remained had it not been for multiple decades of riots, like the Cooper Donuts riot and the Stonewall riots, that got society to start rethinking not just the rights for drag performers, but LGBT rights in general. That period cracked the door open for the long road towards mainstreaming of drag culture, starting in the 80s. Suddenly, drag queens like RuPaul could be seen posing next to high fashion models. Finally, drag was no longer just forced to stay locked behind closed doors, it was in the streets. It was becoming a part of pop cultural conversation. Fast forward another few decades of cultural evolution, and RuPaul was taking drag and putting it on your TV. RuPaul's Drag Race premiered in 2009, but really hit it big around 2014, right around that same second boom of makeup influencers that we saw on YouTube around the mid-2010s. And as Drag Race became part of the mainstream pop culture, so did its stars and their culture. Suddenly, people weren't just taking makeup advice from the YouTuber in their bedroom, they were watching Trixie Mattel tell them how to transform into a living Barbie. They were seeing the skills of the Ravens of the world, who used makeup in a way that took you from ratchet to snatched. And social media was flooded with queens showing off their looks in hopes of becoming the next big drag superstar. Drag was, and continues to be, everywhere. Really, I just hosted the Streamy Awards and we had the Shea Coulee as part of the show. I was fangirling when I met her. I think I held it in really well. We talked about best places to eat in Chicago. It was very exciting, but holy cow, I don't tend to get celebrity struck, but oh, it was awesome. Anyway, digressions aside, there in the middle of all of this were the makeup influencers and beauty gurus, acting as a bridge from the pillars of drag on TV, which you wouldn't begin to know how to copy, and the regular consumers watching at home. The Nikki Tutorials, the Manny MUAs, and of course, yes, the James Charleses.
I love drag so much, and it was really important to me that my products were able to be used by beginner artists or pro makeup artists like drag queens.
From the contouring to the big in-your-face eyes and lips that help make them stand out from the crowd, both online and IRL, the influence is undeniable. Need more proof? I said that drag's influence came from its stars and its culture, and that, theorists, is the key here. We've talked a lot about how drag looks, but we haven't talked the talk. Drag isn't just looks, it's language, and that language has permeated our everyday lives, especially in the beauty scene. Don't believe me? Here it is.
Come on, season 6, let's get sick.
This could be a sickening lip color.
Can you see how she's beating your face right now?
Is this what that is? Is that the beating?
It literally feels like you're beating your face with a memory foam mattress.
Work it, hunty!
Okay, work, diva.
So when you've done your makeup and it looks extremely good, you are painted.
Paint my face? Huh, now why does that ring a bell?
Let me tell you all about my new makeup brand, Painted.
James, and others like him, grew up learning makeup and language in the era of drag. So it makes sense that when it came time for James to put on his first solo line, he went with what he knew, what he grew up with, drag. Now, I'm not saying that co-opting a phrase like painted for your own monetary benefit is a good thing. I mean, Drag Race alum Raven even has a show called Painted, all focused on featuring the talent of creative makeup artists. So I'm just gonna leave that one over to the court of public opinion. But what is cool is how this one product really is the culmination of centuries of advancement, technologically, artistically, and culturally. And that, my friends, is the 1,000-year history of why James Charles is selling me paint. But
having said that, MadPats, you do recognize that for the past few decades, there's an extreme acceleration. I understand that we are all human beings. Change is inevitable. But the changes that you mentioned occurred in a period of thousands of years, hundreds of years, not within the spans of 1 or 2 years or 5 to 10 years, which we are seeing right now. So I do not know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because the change is happening so fast, so quickly, so accelerated. I don't know what I don't know. And it's challenging our thinking in traditional mindset, especially in this day and age where human beings are ultimately, unfortunately, going to decline. And I'm saying this of my own thinking, okay? Maybe introducing and exposing this sort of things to younger generations, kids or people of my age who are, highly fertile, will decrease the amount of babies right now and later in the future. 5 years later, 10 years later, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50 years later, human population declines. And one of the key reasons may be because of this, drag races. And look, as I mentioned before, I'm biased for human beings. I want to see human beings grow. I want to see human beings improve, develop, mature, have more human beings out there on this planet Earth, on this solar system, on this universe, in this galaxy universe. But what we are seeing now is the decline of human beings as we know it. Singapore have a fertility rate of 1.2. Is it 1.0 or 1.2? More, if I'm not wrong, more than 55% of all countries on this planet right now have more than 55% have less than 2.1. The 2.1 is the recommended number of babies per woman during peacetime. Recommended. And more than 55% of all countries have less than that. That's a bad sign. That's a very bad sign that human is going towards extinction. My point is, maybe overexposure, maybe over supportive, over encouragement towards these sort of things will further accelerate the decline of human populations. Maybe.
Hey, that's just a theory. A style theory. Don't forget that you can get 55% off your first month of Scentbird by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the description and using the code STYLE
55%.
Theory 55 at checkout. Scentbird has really changed the smell game for me, and believe me when I say it, when you're in a crowded office with a bunch of people for hours on end in meetings, that is key to keeping the peace. So head on over, grab your exclusive Style Theory deal, and get started on your scent journey. As always, my friends, keep looking sharp, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed and hope you like, share, subscribe, comment, follow. You get the point. Thank you so much. But hey, that's just a theory, a style theory. Keep looking sharp. And I hope to see you all in my next video. Thank you so much. Subscribe. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your subscriptions. Thank you.